So much controversy surrounded the release of Fallout 4, predominantly the incessant screaming that Fallout 4 was just not as good as Fallout New Vegas. Now, I see where you're coming from, and in parts I agree, but I'd be hard pressed to say that Fallout 4 is a bad game considering my 200-ish plus hours and multiple playthroughs. So, instead of screaming into the air, let's talk about what Fallout 4 did wrong, what it did right, and where it really missed the ball on taking what it should have from New Vegas. So let's start on a positive note. Graphics are an obvious improvement. You can't really argue about that. But in this day, if graphics aren't better than what we had in New Vegas, then there's not really an excuse. And really, improving upon New Vegas' graphics shouldn't really have been that hard in the first place. They did a great job on it, and in my opinion, it is a very pretty game. Next, we have stuff like the armor customization. Instead of putting on pre-made armor sets like you do in New Vegas, you could mix and match to make your own thing. It adds that level of customization to your character, and it adds a level of character progression to it as well. You slowly get better armor, and you slowly end up looking a bit more badass. Now, I know again that's kind of similar in most games. The further you get in the game, the better the armor set you get. But in my opinion, it just adds that little bit extra to it. They also improved on the combat so much. This is really one of the areas in the game that was a big talking point. Another common complaint was that Fallout 4 turned too much into a first-person shooter, and yeah, you can argue that it does, but you can't deny that they made the combat the best it's been in any Fallout title. You still have VATS, but you also still have some fantastic normal gunplay in it. I mean, do we remember when we couldn't even aim down the sights in Fallout 3? I mean, I remember the first time I actually aimed down the sights in New Vegas, and my mind was blown. It was such an awesome addition that everyone praised. But when you get right down to it, they just improved upon the combat even more. No matter your playstyle, if you play melee or guns, it's just so much enjoyable for both. Then we got to think about the crafting. It was such a great implementation to the game. Sure, there was some minor crafting in Fallout 3 and New Vegas. You could find the odd blueprint and you could build the special weapons that were hidden around the world. The shish kebab, the rocket launcher, the railway rifle. But now in 4 you can take a generic hunting rifle that you picked off the ground and use all the scraps that you've picked up to upgrade it into like an awesome sniper rifle or something along those lines. You can upgrade it to your heart's content. It's a great advance on things, it really was. So, now that I've given the game the praise that it deserves, shall we go on to where they missed the ball on? Well, to start with, people say the RPG systems are just not as good as in previous titles, and again, I see exactly where they're coming from and have to agree. Your stats have real meaning in New Vegas, and there are skill checks in every other conversation, and every other quest has some kind of extra skill check in it, which makes the mission easier if your character build is done in a certain way. Now, in 4, they really don't mean as much. Sure, they matter for the character build in regards to your playstyle, but in regards to dialogue and how quests are done, they don't really have as big an effect as in New Vegas. Sure, there are a few options. Maybe you could upgrade your science and disable a turret from now and again if you haven't already shot it like I have. But unlike New Vegas, they just mean so much less. You could literally talk your way through the final boss fight if your speech skill was maxed out in New Vegas. Then, in the Old World Blues DLC, when you talk to your own brain, you get sassed by it if your intelligence is too low. Your own brain calls you dumb, and frankly, that's some of the best dialogue that I've ever seen in the game. So, saying all of this, it's quite clear that New Vegas had arguably some of the best mechanics in the series. When I talk about mechanics, I'm not talking about the combat, I'm talking about the way you can interact with the world, the way dialogue handles, stuff like that. You have these skill checks constantly, which just really add to it. Your choices matter, and the stat choices you made really mattered a lot. Fallout 4 is arguably a bit limited and shallow compared to the other games, and the RPG-esque elements just really aren't as strong. Next, they removed the faction system and the karma system in the game. Now, karma wasn't really a deep system at all. It was a very black and white thing in the end. In the end, it didn't really add a lot to the game, but it gives your character a reputation. They're known for being a total saint or a total asshole. I felt like in Fallout 4 it was a lot harder to be evil. Of course, it's all subjective in the end about what faction is good and evil, especially in Fallout 4, and in New Vegas it was slightly more black and white. Like, you can easily say that the NCR were the good guys and the Legion were the bad. But in 4, it really felt like you were always being shoehorned into the good guy role. You were always helping someone, no matter what faction you were actually helping. Then we get onto the ending of the games. Now, Fallout 4's ending is lackluster, to say the very least. When I finished it, I was left with an extreme dissatisfaction. Nothing felt complete. It all felt like a waste in the end, like my journey to finish what I started was really rather pointless. The endings were barely even customized to your character. Your choices just didn't have much of an effect. New Vegas, however, it told a story and it gave you such closure. Almost every side quest and companion had some kind of slideshow ending. It told you what happened, what you did, and how it made a difference in that person's life. There was a sense of completion and a sense that you came into this world and actually made a difference. However, now that I've really slagged off Fallout 4's RPG systems, let me share a story with you. I made a character who at the start was going to be a joke. I named him Erectus, for God's sake. I started him thinking I would make some psycho bonkers old bastard, and I actually managed to make that quite well. I would pick all the asshole comments and the sarcastic ones, as many as I could. And I actually made a sarcastic psycho bonkers old man who ran around with a massive hammer beating people to death, and who was drugged up half the time. He started off as a member of the Brotherhood of Steel, an unlikely soldier and a seriously unstable one. Then he found himself joining a cult. The Children of Atom became his home. He ended up worshipping radiation as much as he could. Until he found his real home in Nuka World, where he became the leader of the Raider gangs and finally told Preston Garvey to shove it. He's been through a lot and I felt a connection to him. A bit more of a connection than any other character I made in New Vegas. Yes, they offer different factions. You could join Caesar's Legion and the NCR, you could go with Mr. House, or you could work for yourself. But I never felt as much of a connection as I did to this psycho old nutjob. I didn't take myself or the game too seriously when I set out with this character. I just rolled with what I thought he would do and it worked surprisingly well. I understand I kind of made this character from my own imagination. I added story elements myself. But isn't that what RPGs are meant to be? It was fun to just be silly with the game, adding my own story elements to the character. Some may disagree and say that the game should kind of do that for you, but to get a truly good character that you really love and fall in love with, you need to get a connection and make them your own. You need to add these stories to them. So, to wrap things up, if we could get the combat and the world from Fallout 4, with the New Vegas RPG mechanics, world interaction, skill checks and stuff like that, it would make such a great game. I understand games need to test things out, like the new dialogue system, which backfired pretty massively, and the voice protagonist and stuff like that, but you should learn from your mistakes and take what is already great and use it to your advantage. But those are just my thoughts on what Fallout 4 could have done better. So let me know if you disagree with me. I'm sure there's some people out there who will and will tell me to shut up and that New Vegas is the master game and that Fallout 4 is a pile of crap. If you do feel that way, let me know, and if you made it this far, thanks for listening to me ramble on about this. I hope you enjoyed, and well, hopefully I'll see you next time.